to you and your team, the Park Ave Group.
Thanks, Janae. I appreciate that. And thank you, Stephanie. I'm Kimberly Greenberg, as Janae mentioned, and I'm with my team, Armin Del Medico and Jamal Davis, who are also on. And we are the Park Ave Group. We have spent a lot of time recently focusing on planning for families who have children with special needs. We came about this pretty much, as Janae mentioned, my daughter was born with special needs. This was unknown while we were, I was pregnant, and literally the first day she failed her hearing test, and the rest kind of just led us down a path that was unknown territory. My daughter has a rare genetic disorder, which she was diagnosed a week before her second birthday, and she was the 8th case worldwide with this syndrome. So as you can imagine, and I'm sure a lot of you have gone through, there's a lot of unknown that comes about, and just kind of trying to navigate these new waters that we were unprepared for. So I came, first we found the doctors and we found the therapist. And then when I came back to work after my maternity leave, I started noticing that the expenses were piling up and trying to navigate what I can and can't do for a child with special needs. And I found there was very limited resources out there. So I approached Armand, who is my partner, and told him that this was something that interests me. And we kind of decided that there is a real need for this, and we wanted to help cover that. So my daughter, just to give you a little bit more background on her, she was born 5 years ago. Initially, she failed her hearing test in the hospital. Then initially the first 4 months, we were very concerned about her hearing, which magically got a little bit better. I joked that I had 1 weekend of somewhat normalcy. And then all of a sudden we were at the pediatrician, and she looked at me and she was like, "You need to go to a neurologist and see the eye doctor immediately." And then it kind of just spiraled out of control from, we needed 2 eye surgeries. We were at the neurologist, we were at the geneticist trying to figure out what exactly was going on. We have, the whole slew of every doctor under the sun. We started PT, OT, speech, eating therapy, aquatherapy. When she was able to get on the horse, we were able to do horseback riding therapy. So it's just been, as you guys can imagine, a long road, and a lot of it is very lonely. And there's a lot that, you kind of have to take one day at a time. So throughout this, I realized that this was, very overwhelming in itself, just from the medical standpoint. But again, I kept trying to plan for the future, and I didn't know how. I didn't know what rules were surrounded what can be in a child with special needs name. And I also didn't know what was out there in regards to a special needs trust and ABLE account. So we ended up doing a lot of research, and I decided that I wanted to become a chartered special needs consultant, as Janae is also starting to do. This is our presentation. Thank you. So anyway, so I ended up, getting my chartered special needs consultant, and kind of just realizing that there was, as I mentioned, like a huge need for this, and it's very unpredictable, and just trying to navigate these waters. So what we realized was how important financial planning was. Obviously, planning for the future in general without a child with special needs is complex and complicated. It's very complex, and we have to focus on that. However, when you have a child with special needs, as I'm sure most of you are aware, it's even more complicated and complex, just due to the nature of, what can just kind of come out of nowhere, and that you can't necessarily plan for everything. So I wanted to kind of give you a little case study about a family that we recently just worked with, and it really kind of shows the complexity that our team goes into in planning for the future. So pretty much, this woman, Jen, was referred to me, knowing that we had a team dedicated to the special needs market, and we understood planning for children with special needs. She reached out to me, and she and I ended up speaking for an hour. She told me about her family, her husband, her daughter, and her son who has special needs. Her son, Rob, who has Down syndrome, is 11 years old. And during the year, Jen started realizing that, God forbid something happened to her or husband, thank you to COVID, that was a big eye opener, that they had not done any planning for the future, and it began weighing on her. I briefly opened up to her about my daughter and how I understood her fears, reminding her that there are no right or wrong questions to ask, and this process will ensure how she wanted to make sure everything was in order, just in case. I gave her a brief overview of what our team does, the roles each of us play collectively, how we worked with our families and special needs. Our team does a deep dive, which we consider the discovery stage, looking at everything from your current investments, your insurance, your mortgages, trust documents that you have, any ABLE accounts, college savings accounts, how many other children you have, and anything else that's important to the family. I explained to her that calling was a huge first step because I think, as we all know, time is very limited when you are raising a child with special needs, between the doctor's appointments, the therapist, especially this past year, if you're homeschooling, trying to play the PT, the OT, the speech therapist, doing, Zoom school, or if you're in school in person. It just, there's so much unknown recently. So even more than before, time is very hard to come by. But it's a huge first step to call. And I was able to help her. And I wanted to help her answer any of her questions so she can sleep better at night, knowing she's set up for the future. One of her main concerns that was derived from the discovery meeting was she stressed not leaving her daughter with the financial burden for caring for her son. So we made sure that it was something that took priority and to plan for that. 2 days later, we had a follow-up call with her and her husband and introduce them to the team and what the next steps would look like regarding the relationship with the Park Ave group. They were eager to get going and wanted to have a call at the beginning of the following week. That night, they collected all of their paperwork. As I mentioned, they were very eager. That doesn't always happen, but they put together all their investments that they currently had, their current insurance, if they had it, any college and ABLE accounts that were open, their mortgages, and sent it over. Over the next few days, our team did a second opinion overview of what their big picture looked like. So when we had our next call, we can ask all the necessary questions for the planning process. On our next call, Jamal Davis, who will jump in shortly, who is our certified financial planner on our team, worked with Jen and Mark, asking the questions that came out of our second opinion review and how they would like to see their future. For example, what expenses they might have and or want to have planned for, what they foresee might be coming up. A lot of us might have help that some people normally, once their kids are in kindergarten, is reduced, but for us, it might be more lifelong for the duration of the needs of the child with special needs. This stage becomes the foundation for the financial plan being developed. Jamal, do you want to give a few examples?
Absolutely, Kim. And I think that the financial planning process is very detailed. As you mentioned, the family put together all of their documents, which is always very helpful to make sure that we are assessing the appropriate information and setting out goals and objectives for them to achieve for their family in the short term and the long term. A few examples would be in terms of, when would you like to retire? What type of expenses are going to be still in effect while you're in retirement, as well as your children, and the care that they may need while you're in retirement? Understanding that some of those expenses may not stop. So how do we plan to make sure that the family is achieving their retirement goals while also meeting the needs of their children? That's one example. Another example is doing an analysis of their insurance landscape. What insurance do you have currently in place? And how long will that be in place? Is it permanent insurance? Is it term insurance? How long will that insurance be in place? What's the death benefit associated with it? Is there cash value? And what does that really mean for providing a legacy for your children and your loved ones, in the people that you're caring for upon your passing? And all of this is very important because the nuances of families who have loved ones with special needs is understanding what that death benefit essentially will cover, or what that cash value will cover in terms of providing for that loved one upon a passing. These two analysis are very standard that we like to do, and we always bring in specialists to add additional context and their skill set to this conversation. So we act as a quarterback in that capacity, making sure that everybody's looking at the financial plan and how that plays out for the family and accomplishing their goals. We'll also bring in estate attorneys, as Kim will mention, in terms of what we do. And at the end of the day, we look at different scenarios. We want the families to understand that it's not always going to be a static document where we do it once and then we don't revisit it again. Your lives are dynamic, and we want to make sure that the financial plan is dynamic to assess and be able to prepare for changes in your life, and how we are going to build around that and make sure that we're always moving in the right direction and keeping your goals in place. So those are a few examples. This is a very dynamic process, as Kim will go through on the subsequent items here. But Kim, I just wanted to give a little bit of understanding in that context.
Thank you, Jamal. So after we run, as Jamal mentioned, this very detailed plan that is a live tool that we use and update based on any sort of changes that occur from in your life, whether it's a new job, a birth of a child, a divorce, a marriage, anything, an engagement, whatever it might be. So like going back to this family, once we put the plan together, we met with them again and went through their specific scenario. And we had found and shared with them what we came up with. So for this specific scenario, we found out that they were invested inappropriately for what we believe were their needs. They needed more insurance. They needed to update their trust and estate docs and include a special needs trust. They had an ABLE account, which was great, but they were not taking advantage and funding it. So that was one opportunity we did see. And we ended up seeing that from their mortgage, with rates being very low at this time, that they should refinance. And we ended up saving them hundreds of dollars a month. As to not overwhelm them, we agreed to a plan on how to put all this into action. So the first one, because it was time sensitive, was to start the refinance process and lock in the rates. The second one would be to open all their accounts and move the assets over. Again, we gave a presentation, which Armand Delmedico, who's on here, who's our investment specialist, can help go over a little bit in a few minutes. And we developed a plan for them on how to invest them appropriately. Afterwards, we deployed their money into the investment plan that we came up with. While we were doing steps 1, 2, and 3, we had them engage with our insurance specialists and experts to start the conversation there. And lastly, we directed them to our attorney that we work with to have them help update and draft trust documents. This was being done in tandem with everything else. So where we are today, we've completed 1 through 3. We completed the refinance process. We've gotten all the accounts open and all the assets over, and the assets are now currently reinvested the way we all agreed seemed the most appropriate. The insurance, because just in the insurance world, it takes some time, and due to COVID, things are a little slower. So we're in the process of getting that completed, and they're working directly with our attorney, who we're in touch with, in drafting and finalizing their trust docs. So recently, actually, last week, I had a conversation with the mother, who called to thank us for everything and telling us that she can sleep a little better at night. She still feels more secure knowing that if something was to happen to her and her husband, that their son would be protected and her daughter would not feel financially burdened. One way that we decided to handle that was through insurance. Even though it's not completed, we have come to the conclusion that they want to do a second to die policy. I'm not sure who's familiar with the second to die policy, but what that is it's a perfect vehicle to use for a special needs trust, because you set it up that it's what it is, second to die. So if you have a husband and wife, and let's say the husband passes before the wife, when the wife passes, the money gets put into the special needs trust. It doesn't get put in after the husband passes, it gets put in once the passing of the second spouse. So this way they can have $1 million policy that goes directly to the child with special needs, and it's relatively less expensive than a whole life policy. And it gives them a little bit more comfort knowing it's not a term that will eventually end. It'll be there always as long as you pay your premium. In this way, their daughter will have that money to use to help support the child, the son. So also, which was very nice, after she came up, was telling us and thanking us, she did say that she referred us to 3 other families because she emphasized the human factor that we bring to the relationship, the efficiency of our process, which took a great deal of stress off of their plate, and just knowing that I'm someone that can relate and understand their everyday life, that, as we all know, not everyone in the world does understand. Everyone can be supportive, but obviously there's more. There's more there when it comes to raising a child with special needs. So I want to turn it over to Armand, who, as I mentioned before, does a lot with our investments, and he can kind of give you a little brief overview on how we got them invested.
Hi, thank you, Kim. And thanks for having us this evening. This is a very powerful presentation, and we're very proud to be a part of this. Really, my understanding and learning throughout the last 3 or 4 years I've been working with Kim through the special needs planning, investments are critical to our process. And as Jamal was talking about the plan and how do we fund for retirement, how do we fund for post life expectancy of the parents, all of that is predicated upon is how money is invested, what's the income potential from now until the time they're in retirement, and how does the money sort of survive them beyond their lives and for the next generation. That being said, investments are important, and understanding the risk tolerance is important. All the normal processes we employ for investing for families over a long period of time sort of have to take a back seat to a plan that is immediate in this particular situation. And risk tolerance is critical, and capital preservation is even more critical. So to a certain extent, our approach has to be much more conservative from an investment standpoint, because we just don't have the luxury of incurring volatility. And Kim mentioned a few times about their ability to sleep at night knowing that everything is in place. And we want to ensure them that their investment model is going to allow them to sleep well at night also, and not have high volatility that you could incur in traditional investment plans over a long period of time. So we have to take a separate approach to families with children with special needs and build a model of an investment model that complements both growth, income, and security, and has the capabilities of funding the plan that we're putting in place for them that's going to last in perpetuity for the entire family. So we back into this from a standpoint of the discovery meeting, knowing the family and understanding what their assets are, income potential, and what type of assets we're working with to fund the plan. So as a team, we're all collectively having these conversations throughout the process. So there may be situations where it may make sense to do a particular type of investment model or strategy, but adding in the complexities of the family and the situation, we may have to defer to something that's a little bit different and tacked to another direction. So every situation is different, but I think from an investment perspective, our role primarily is to ensure that we're funding the financial plan and keeping the family safe and not exposing them to high volatility and dramatic market moves, if you will. So every plan is different, but I think in our case, for most families with children with special needs, we have to really take a much closer look at some of the downside risk matters initially in a long-term plan.
Thank you, Armand. And just to give one more overview before we pass it on is ABLE accounts. I wanted to discuss ABLE accounts because I believe there was a question ahead of time regarding ABLE accounts. So pretty much what an ABLE account is, it's a great tool to have and to set up. It's pretty much a 529 plan, except for children with special needs. To qualify for it, you need to have a disability that was onset before the age of 26. If you get government benefits, you can still have an ABLE account, and you just pretty much, I guess, there are some fine lines on if you might not qualify for it, but I would definitely discuss with your financial advisor, but also for potentially a doctor in case you feel like your child might not be as disabled as one may qualify. But pretty much you can deposit $15,000 into the account every single year. In Colorado, there's a Colorado ABLE account. It seems very seamless and easy to open an ABLE account in your state, which I would highly recommend. You can have up to $400,000 in Colorado, but the one little asterisk is in order to still remain getting benefits, you have to keep that number under $100,000. Once the account goes over $100,000, they will suspend your government aid. So, that's something just to be mindful of. Of course, if you're just starting out, it's something that would be relatively a few years down the road. If you plan to move over funds from a regular 529 plan, you can just be conscious of the 15,000 annual limit. But if you have been contributing for the past couple of years and with the if it's been an aggressive portfolio and maybe with the market increase, you just want to be mindful that your account does not go over the $100,000. The good news with the ABLE account, unlike the 529 plan, is you can use it immediately for any qualified disability expense. And some of those expenses could be education, food, housing, transportation, employment training, support, assistive technology, doctor's appointments, healthcare expenses, financial management, and administrative services. So, even to pay an attorney to set up trust and estate planning for docs for you, that would be a use for the ABLE account. You can use it for any sort of therapist, healthcare. So there's a huge host of what you're able to use huge host of expenses that you would be able to qualify through an ABLE account. So I just wanted to touch upon that and just make sure that everyone is aware of the 15,000 annual limit, the 100,000 limit if you would like to continue getting government aid. Colorado's limit is 400,000 in the account at any point in time. Again, if you have 400,000 in the account, you would not still be receiving the government aid. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask at the end of the presentation. Now I'm happy to turn it back over to Stephanie. Thank you for having us.
Great. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, UBS. We really appreciate you being here, and we appreciate the information that you have to give. That was so helpful. We did have a couple questions come in, so we will certainly be sure to get to those at the end. So at this point, we'll transition over to Comerica. If Catherine and Jacqueline wanted to come back, hello. I will go ahead and pull up your presentation on the back end here if you guys wanted to do a quick introduction of yourselves.
Yeah, so I'm going to start and do an introduction and a brief overview, and then I'll bring Jackie on. So hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening. We are really excited to be a part of this event. Again, my name is Kathy Holcomb, and I am with Comerica Bank. I'm a trust specialist. And Comerica Bank is also referred to as Comerica Bank and Trust NA. NA stands for National Association, and we have trust powers in all 50 states. We also have over $160 billion in assets under management. Comerica has been providing trust and estate services since the year 1849. And this calendar year actually marks our 172nd anniversary. We also have trust offices around the country, and that does include downtown Denver. Now, in addition to investable assets, a trust may also be funded with some unique assets, and that might consist of real property, which could be residential or commercial, could be closely held assets, which would be a limited partnership or an LLC, could be oil, gas, mineral assets, it could be royalties, farmland, regardless. Comerica has the capabilities to administer trusts with unique assets. In fact, we have a specialty asset group internally, and it is comprised of specialists that are located around the country. So when considering a corporate trustee to name, it is important to know the capabilities and the stability of the firm. Now then, I do want to make mention the fact that Comerica can act in the capacity of trustee, co-trustee, personal representative, and executor, and those two terms are actually, they mean the same thing. We can act as conservator of a conservatorship. However, we do not act in the capacity of a financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, or a guardian of the individual. We do make it our practice, though, to work closely and directly with those individuals named in those roles on behalf of a beneficiary and or client. That could be a minor child, and that can also be an incapacitated adult. Now then, I also want to provide some insight on our relationship with UBS. Comerica has been partnering with UBS Financial Services since the early 90s. And this actually dates back to when their name was Payne Weber. We have an open architecture model. This model allows for the separation of duties. So you have the separation of investment management duties, as well as the separation of trust and estate administration responsibilities. And as a client, you really get the best of both worlds. You get the expertise of your UBS financial advisor who's going to customize and craft an asset allocation to meet the needs of the client, as well as to craft the allocation in accordance with the type of trust. You also get the expertise of a corporate trustee that's got hundreds of years of precedent. Moreover, you get oversight from two very reputable firms. And quite frankly, in today's day and age, that's really very significant because there are so many unfortunate stories that you hear involving individuals and firms. But please know that our partnership allows a dual set of eyes on your best interests. So we've got lots of questions, as it's already been mentioned, and we absolutely want to get to each and every one of them. So I am going to introduce Jacqueline O'Connor. She is our Comerica National Manager of Special Needs Solutions. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jackie.
Thanks so much, Kathy. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And I'm happy to be here, everyone, as well. I'm going to ask Stephanie, if you don't mind, if we could bring up our presentation. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Stephanie. So as Kathy said, I head the Special Needs Solutions team at Comerica Bank. And Stephanie, we can switch to the next slide if you don't mind. And I do work alongside Kathy. I head the team, and we have footprint offices all around the country with special needs trust advisors in offices such as New York, where Kim and the Park Avenue Group is, in Michigan, in Texas, Florida, California, and soon to be Chicago. We have other Comerica Alliance offices in other parts of the country, so we can really service and meet the needs of our clients all throughout the country and nationwide. And I wanted to make certain that you knew that if questions that we didn't get to today, if there's any follow-up or anything that came to mind next week, next year, that our contact information would be in the presentation, which is what you see now. Stephanie, let's transition to the next slide, please. So I think Kim and the team gave you a wonderful overview of how your assets as a whole are really important and planning for both today and tomorrow for any family. And that need is increased and the complexity is increased if you have a child with special needs. And so one of the ways that you might work into your estate plan or your financial plan would be to consider a special needs trust. And I'm not going to, I want everyone to know, I'm not going to follow the presentation exactly. I think I'm going to follow Kim's lead, and we're going to talk about everything that's in the presentation, and I might jump around a little bit. So Stephanie, I promise you can yell at me later. So just to get back, Kim had some wonderful suggestions, and Armand and Jamal in their presentation, and I want to really point out some of the things that they said and highlight them, and show you how a corporate trustee works very, very closely with your financial advisory team and with your family. And one of those ways, as you can see on this slide, is with a special needs trust. And if you are a family and you are looking to fund a special needs trust for your child with disabilities, you want to do that via a third-party trust. And third party just means that it is a party in addition to the beneficiary, that the assets that are funding the trust were not the beneficiary's own money. So therefore, if our beneficiary is qualifying for means-tested government benefits, these assets are not includable, and nor would the assets of a third-party trust be subject to a payback provision. And we'll get to what a payback provision is a little bit later in our presentation. So the special needs trust in and of itself is a legal entity that will hold the assets for benefit of a child or an adult with disabilities or special needs. And these trusts were formed solely for the purpose of allowing beneficiaries to qualify for means-tested public assistance. And when I say means-tested, I'm sure that you're all aware, but I'm going to just make it as simplistic as possible. I do mean either SSI benefits or Medicaid. Now, in allowing for qualification for those benefits, the assets in special needs trusts can only be used in limited ways so that we do not risk the loss of benefits. Most importantly, and Kim had this as her parting comment, special needs trusts, and there are two different types, first and third party, that I focused on earlier. A first party trust would be a beneficiary's own funds that are funding this trust. So if they were proceeds of a lawsuit or some sort of a legal award, something of that nature, that would be considered a first party special needs trust. But either trust can work hand in hand with an ABLE account. And Kim, as I said, pointed out some of the wonderful characteristics of an ABLE account. And first and foremost, what is most important for a trustee is almost every state in the nation has adopted the ABLE Act. And even if you do have a first party trust, which means it does have that payback to a state that's providing aid, they will allow for you to fund an ABLE account annually. And so it becomes really important to take the funds from that first party trust first to fund that ABLE account. And we can get into the specifics of that later on. Stephanie, let's move to the next slide, please. So here's where, and perhaps I should have had this slide prior to the previous one, so I apologize for that. Here's where I'm going to give you a quick overview of the different types of special needs trusts. As I said, there's first party, and you'll see the different characteristics. First party are normally funded with either litigation settlement, some sort of a lawsuit award, or the beneficiary's own funds. They can be established by a parent, a grandparent, a legal guardian, or the court. And oftentimes, there's always going to be a trustee. Most often, that is going to be a corporate trustee. First party SNTs have what we call a Medicaid payback provision. Section 42 of the USC 1396P D4A, and I'm certain it's much more than you need to know or want to know, but that provision is what states that if a beneficiary is receiving aid during their lifetime via means-tested benefits, so either via SSI or Medicaid, upon their passing, the state, having provided that aid, is entitled to their money back first. So a lien accrues during the lifetime of the beneficiary equal to an amount of the aid that was paid out during their lifetime. Whatever funds are left in the trust upon their passing are first paid to the state to satisfy that lien. And then upon their passing, if there are any funds in excess of the amount of the lien, it is normally paid to the estate. Now, in addition to that first party special needs trust, there's what we call a first party pooled special needs trust, which has all of the same characteristics, but the trustee of those trusts can be a non-for-profit organization, and that organization's fees are oftentimes much, much lower, but they oftentimes perhaps may not have the level of expertise or perhaps the ability to dedicate as much time to families and to beneficiaries. So I do think that sometimes the court will reserve pooled trusts for smaller type of accounts. And then we have third-party special needs trusts, as I discussed earlier. Those are trusts that are funded via gifts from family members. Mom and dad might fund a third-party trust, as UBS mentioned earlier, as Kim mentioned, by perhaps with a second to die policy that's part of their estate plan. As Kim said, wonderful way to fund a third-party trust for your child with disabilities or special needs after mom and dad are no longer here. So when they're not here to sort of spearhead or to assist with them financially and with their care, that's a wonderful way to consider funding that third-party trust. And then again, third-party trust could also have take part in a pooled type special needs trust as well. And that is also where a non-for-profit organization might serve as the trustee. If you don't have a distinguished special needs trust, you may very well have a settlement preservation trust. Settlement preservation trusts are funded in much the same way as special needs trusts, but they do not contain a payback provision. So oftentimes those types of trusts are used for minor children whose parents have an income that exceeds the amount in which they would qualify for benefits. So if you're not going to qualify for benefits, then there's no need to have the strictest type of trust vehicle out there, which is a special needs trust. Settlement preservation trusts are oftentimes a little bit less lenient. And if they are being drafted for an adult, which is possible as well, an adult with disabilities may have been injured, could have, let's say, a traumatic brain injury, a car accident, an accident of some sort. And so if they have a work history and they're able to collect SSDI, that in and of itself or other income may disqualify them from means-tested benefits. Therefore, they would want to set up a settlement preservation trust. Lastly, we have a settlement preservation trust with special needs language. So if we do have a minor child whose family's income exceeds the amount allowed to collect benefits during the child's minority, the child may need to qualify for benefits upon reaching the age of majority. So if that happens, the trust that would then be best suited to that individual would be a settlement preservation trust, so that you were not held to those strict standards while the child was a minor, but that we could flip the trust to a special needs upon the child reaching the age of majority, which would then allow for them to qualify for government-based benefits on their own income. And obviously, if they have no income and their only asset is the trust, they would qualify. It is at the age of majority that payback provision would then come into effect and the lien would begin to accrue. So those are the different types of special needs trusts that are out there. And again, depending upon your situation, your estate planning attorney would work with you to determine which was best suited for you. We can move to our next slide now, Stephanie, please. I think Kathy may have mentioned, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Comerica can serve certainly as trustee, sole trustee. We can act as co-trustee with a parent or a guardian or another professional, of course. We can act as agent for a fiduciary. So if mom and dad do appoint Mary to act as trustee over their son's trust, well, Mary might want to consider appointing Comerica as her agent for her as a fiduciary so that we can help guide her. We can, of course, serve as guardian or conservator over an estate, but we cannot serve as guardian of the person or conservator of the person. We can move to the next slide now, Stephanie, please. So what does a corporate fiduciary do, and how do we handle the day-to-day administration of our trusts? Well, probably first and foremost is we do coordinate with our families. We take a very holistic approach. I think Kim and Armand and Jamal made a wonderful presentation in explaining how I'm going to paraphrase here, and I hope Kim and the team don't mind, but they too, I feel, take a very holistic approach. They look at the family's needs. They look at what your retirement needs are, what your day-to-day needs are now, and then they look at your planning for your child with disabilities or special needs today and in the future. Well, Comerica joins in that effort. What we do as trustee is we would work with Kim and the team to determine what your needs, what your wants are today, tomorrow, next week, 5 years down the line, 25 years down the line. We look at your child's needs, what the intent of that special needs trust really is, and we try to plan for that. If the trust is funded inter vivos during your lifetime, if it's a third party or if it's a first party, we look at what benefits we can provide to our beneficiary, and then perhaps what ancillary benefits might help the rest of the family. So we can pay bills that are dedicated to our beneficiary. We can review medical expenses. We can make certain that the beneficiaries maximizing their ability to collect government benefits. Are you not aware that SSI is perhaps an available resource for you? Or perhaps there's a waiver program that we might put into effect for your child that would allow for them to qualify for benefits regardless of your income. We assist with purchasing vehicles. The trust could purchase a home. We allow for renovations. We, as I said, perhaps most importantly is we coordinate with your financial advisors, with Kim and the team at UBS, with your attorneys, with your accountants, to make certain that our beneficiaries' personal tax returns are prepared timely each and every year. And we make certain that tax liabilities and things of that nature are paid. Those are just some of the ways that we add that extra value to the day-to-day administration of these types of trusts. And when Comerica comes on board, the family's life is supposed to get a little bit easier. And our beneficiary's life is supposed to be enhanced just a little bit more by allowing for us to assist with some of these things. We can move to the next slide now, Stephanie. And so why would you choose Comerica? Comerica has what is considered, or what I like to say is considered, a center of excellence for special needs trust administration. We do serve all 50 states and, as I said, administer all special needs trusts and court-appointed relationships. We have a dedicated team of subject matter experts that have varying levels of education, from attorneys to JDs to certified trust and financial advisors, and to people who have been in the industry for no less than 20 years. We have been dealing with special needs trust. I personally am in this industry just over 30 years, and I think that each and every of my colleagues, with perhaps 2 junior trust advisors, have been in the industry for just as long as I have. So we are well versed in the benefits arena and special needs arena. We do have continual training internally as well as externally, conferences, our Special Needs Alliance, as well as training sessions that I put forth for all of my team members. And I did go ahead and just give you the members of our team there that I briefly went over and mentioned the footprint offices earlier. We can go ahead and move to the next slide, please, Stephanie. And I know that I've touched on this quite a bit earlier, but I just want to highlight how it is that we would partner with UBS. And there's a bunch of information there, but I couldn't stress enough the value in an entire team approach. If your child or loved one has a special needs trust, whether it's first party or third party, it is really an entire team that you would need to come on board, and that would really be best suited to assist your entire family. Together, as it says, together we would be dedicated to your financial success. Together, we have personal life experiences addressing the financial challenges of parenting a child with special needs. We understand the ongoing nature of special needs healthcare costs and the strain it does put on an entire family. Together, we would develop the investment plan that would take into consideration your family's needs and wants, as I said, today, tomorrow, and well into the future. And hopefully, if we do this right, and we really develop that relationship, then as a team, together we become a part of your family. And I think that I'm certain that Kim and Armand and Jamal and Kathy and myself, just from everything that I've heard tonight, I'm certain that they would all agree with that. It's an approach that doesn't allow for us to stay on the sidelines. It really is something that has to sit in both our head and our heart, and we dive in wholeheartedly. So with that being said, I think, Stephanie, we could move to our last slide, which I thought was going to be questions. So I'm certainly going to turn it back over to you now, Stephanie, and I'm happy to answer the questions that we received in advance, or certainly we can take whatever questions you'd like for us to address now.
Sure. So thank you guys so much. It's invaluable information that you're providing. And I already got an email as you were speaking from someone who was not able to make it or could only make a small portion of this presentation and asked to receive the rest. So thank you all so much for this information. I'll go ahead and transition us back to some questions now. We'll start with the ones that we got throughout the presentation. And I'm sorry, I can't speak from experience, so I'm not sure if most of the questions that were submitted ahead were already answered by you all. If they were, then I don't know if there's a necessity to go back over them, but again, up to you guys as the professionals. So I'll go ahead and start with one of our first questions. Someone did ask, can appreciated assets be donated to an ABLE account?
So I'll jump in here. They cannot. You're only allowed to contribute cash to an ABLE account. And that also stands true with a regular 529 account as well, not just a 529A account, which is an ABLE account.
Another question that came in was, can multiple people contribute $15,000 each in the same year? For example, mom contributes 15K, dad contributes 15K, other family member contributes in the same year.
Again, the answer to that is also no. It's 15,000 total. I wish it was that way. I think we all do, but unfortunately that would make it too easy. It's 15,000 total. So, you know, if grandma gave you 5,000 and, you know, mom and dad gave you, 8,000, and then someone else, friends gave you 2,000, that's what it would be. You can't, it's unfortunately. And if you do, let's say a scenario, which actually, personal to me, I wasn't sure initially where my daughter would fall. I opened a 529 account before ABLE accounts really became more popular. We funded that. Now, as of recently, they allow you without penalty to move over 529 accounts into a 529A account. Again, that's an ABLE account. So you can do that. But again, that money also goes towards that 15,000. So you can't roll over money from a 529 account and additionally add on top of it 15,000. And I just want to jump in really quickly and say one thing to Jacqueline's final statement, where you said, Jacqueline, that like we become part of the family. As someone that has very personal connection to this, I think it is very, very true from everyone you work with when you are raising a child with a disability. Just to give you a quick 2-second example, I had a family emergency when I was away 3 weeks ago. And the most comfortable people that I felt to reach out to were the doctors, the therapists, attorneys, like anyone that really sort of understood what I was working with, even more so than my friends. So I think it's a very true statement that all the people you surround yourself with need to have that understanding of what you're going through, because there's nothing else like it, so I just wanted to touch upon that point that it is, and I'm sure everyone who's listening does feel the same way, how everyone that kind of becomes in your web becomes part of your family. So Jacqueline, I like that statement.
Thank you.
Great. So those were the only 2 questions that came in. If there are any other questions, participants, that you wanted to add at this time, feel free to add them. I can also just ask some of the questions that I had sent you all ahead of time to make sure they were answered, if that works.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Great. So one of the questions was your insight on how to manage special needs trusts and ABLE accounts to maximize advantages.
So I did recall that question. And so I don't know that I really answered it in its entirety. If you have a first party special needs trust that does contain a payback, right? So at the end of our beneficiary's lifetime, we are obligated to pay the government back first. But because distributions to ABLE accounts are allowed in most every state, here on the East Coast, Pennsylvania is a little bit iffy. They're not so fond of us wanting to take money away from funds that they potentially have the need to take back. So I argue every now and again with the head of the Pennsylvania DHS department, but I'm really good at arguing, so it's okay. So because most states allow for that contribution, you should first and foremost absolutely set up the ABLE account, and you should absolutely on January 1 of every year request that $15,000 out of your first party special needs trust, because 1, it is an allowable expense, and 2, it takes it out of the umbrella of the payback and puts it into funds that you can use for your loved one. And the ABLE account can be used, as Kim may have mentioned, I think earlier, the ABLE account can be used for some of the distributions that a special needs trust cannot be. And if you have a first party special needs trust and you are collecting benefits, means tested government benefits, the payment of shelter-related expenses, utilities, and things of that nature has the ability to reduce your SSI benefit by the maximum of 1/3. So, and that's if it's paid directly by the special needs trust. However, if you pay that out of your ABLE account, it does not, it takes away that potential to lose that 1/3. So that's $250, $260 a month that you can get back by paying that same expense out of your ABLE account. So that's just one way to maximize funding that ABLE account, and then taking those distributions that are better served coming from the ABLE account instead of the trust.
And while you were speaking on that, another question came in asking what types of fees are required to set up and maintain accounts.
Stephanie,
You're on
please
mute.
forgive me. I was going to say, please forgive me, Stephanie, because if you're speaking, I'm not hearing you.
Oh, can you guys hear me now?
I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay. So another question came in while you were speaking that just asked what types of fees are required to set up and maintain these accounts.
And when we say these accounts, and I'm hopeful that the person who asked the question can hear us, are we referring to an ABLE account, or are we referring to the special needs trust? Or perhaps both?
Yeah, it says these accounts. Feel free to put it in the chat, but I think you were answering a question on an ABLE account, but that was Joan who put it in there. So Joan, feel free to add in the chat if you meant a trust account or an ABLE account, and we can answer that one.
Let me tell you what, why don't we just answer both?
That's special
I'm
needs
gonna
trusts.
oh, special needs trust. Okay. No problem. Thank you, Joan. So when you have, Comerica obviously has a fee schedule. And when we partner with UBS, there are segregated fees. So Comerica charges a fee as the corporate trustee, and then UBS would charge an investment management fee. And I don't have that UBS, those fees, and everything is sort of based upon the market value. So it's normally a sliding scale, a percentage that's applied to a sliding scale depending upon the market value. Comerica's minimum fee, our minimum account size is $1 million in investable assets. So we couldn't accept an account that had a market value lower than $1 million. And if the account was going to hold any type of those specialty assets or real estate that Kathy may have mentioned earlier, it would have to be $1 million in marketable securities, in addition to the specialty assets and real estate. And the minimum fee for that on an annual basis is $7,000, I believe. Kathy, please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank
We
you.
start off at 70 basis points on the first 1 million, and then the fee schedule tiers down after that. So depending upon the market value overall of the trust, then that would determine our all-in fee schedule. So 70 basis points on the first 1 million. Basis points, it's hard. I know everybody's not familiar with that, but to do the math, you would say $1 million times 0.0070. The next $2 million is 60 basis points, which is 0.0060. And it continues to tier down. But if you wanted to follow up with either one of us to discuss a scenario, we would be happy to do that.
Great, thanks, Kathy. And the only other thing I want to point out to everyone is, $1 million is a tremendous amount of money. And I can absolutely relate that perhaps not everybody has $1 million lying around that they can gift into a trust. So again, I want you to keep in the back of your mind that that's where Kim and the team would really come into play with some of those out of the box thinking and funding in those second to die policies and things of that nature, your retirement assets, your things like that. So it's absolutely a conversation with your advisory team is probably the best place to start for that. And then Kim, perhaps you might want to speak. Did you want to speak on the UBS portion of what those fees might look like?
Sure. And also just to jump in to answer the question, because she also asked with the setup. So I'm assuming in terms of like getting a special needs trust drafted.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were in New York, so things tend to be a little bit, maybe a little bit higher, but in general, it's really based upon the attorneys that you go to. But on average, at least in our demographic, which is a lot of like the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, we see, depending upon how complex your estate planning needs would be, anywhere from about 2,000, 2,500 to about 5,000, 6,000 to get some wills, trusts, and estate special needs trust set up. There's two ways to set up a special needs trust. One is a standalone, which would cost a little bit more money, and one would be part of the will. So once you pass, then it becomes its own entity. So again, it's all something that it's all based upon your needs and how complex your planning is. But again, that would be something to reach out to your local attorney. If you don't have one, there might be somebody in the Denver office that could put you in touch. And a little bit on the UBS fees, similar to Jacqueline, we charge a % of assets under management. We don't charge money to open accounts. We don't charge money on cash, but if we have investable assets, we do charge usually about 1 to 1.25% on those assets that we're helping and invest. And we do charge financial goal analysis, which is what we consider our financial plan, a fee on that as well. It usually ranges, depending on the situation, about $2,000 to $3,000 per family. We do a lot of the time for our special needs families do reduce it down to like between $2,000 and $2,500, just based on the needs that we, as someone that understands firsthand the expenses that we all incur, we want to try and give them a little bit of a discount. But again, that is a plan that grows with you over time. It is not a one and done. It's a live, updatable plan based on any sort of changes in your family. Again, as I mentioned, anywhere, it could be a marriage, a divorce, a death in the family, a new job. We constantly are updating it. So that's pretty much a little bit about our fees. Again, personal situations we can help answer based, certain questions, but that's all.
Right.
Someone else had an additional question, just what are the other options if you don't have $1 million?
Okay. Another option would be to find an individual to act as your trustee versus a corporate trustee. There's always pros and cons to that, because you absolutely are going to want somebody that's well versed on special needs and the laws, and every state is different with how they handle that. And I know that another option for people that have a trust, it's a private fiduciary, but they're not considered corporate trustees. And I don't know that I personally don't have any recommendations for a private fiduciary that is well versed in special needs trusts. But Jackie, do you have any insight on what another option would be if it's less than $1 million?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So in cases that there are certainly corporate fiduciaries out there that will accept accounts under $1 million. So you can certainly find one. But if you are having some difficulties, that is where a special needs, a pooled trust would really come into play and work well for you. Again, pooled trusts are oftentimes with charitable organizations, such as ARC, or there's normally a pooled trust fund in every state. So you can absolutely find one. And if you are having difficulties finding a pooled trustee, a charitable trustee that will serve, and you can add to that pooled trust, then please give me a call. I have resources in every state, and I can put you in touch with that organization in your state, in Colorado, if you're in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In terms of the questions that were sent ahead of time, there was a pretty specific question, situationally, that someone asked. They have a daughter and their fiance, so they're wondering about SSI and SLI and long-term care. They're planning a common law wedding and want to keep their accounts separate. So would any of those things change by having a common law wedding? how would they set up a trust fund and will, and what would that look like once they're married?
So I'm gonna start my response here with the disclaimer that this question is probably best served being answered by your estate planning attorney. But I'm happy to offer you an opinion a little bit. So I guess I'm not exactly sure what you mean when you say a common law wedding. So common law, so in where Kim and I are in New York State, New York recognizes common law, and that is if you live together, if you have an established relationship under the same roof for more than 7 years, I believe then you are considered to have a common law marriage. But if there's no legal union, then I believe you can certainly keep your finances separate and keep your qualifications for benefits solely based on yourself as an individual. Now, it is possible that some means tested benefits go on household income and not individual income. So I couldn't be certain that because you're both living under the same roof that you wouldn't disqualify. But again, that is absolutely a question best answered by a trust and estate planning attorney.
Can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Now can you hear me?
Now can. Now can.
Yeah, okay. Did anyone else have anything to add on that question?
No, I would say the same thing. Definitely,
Okay.
we're not allowed to give like legal advice. So,
Right.
Sure.
unfortunately, I don't want to really overstep. I do know just by basic law that it also depends if you're both receiving benefits, if one of you is not receiving benefits. It's, it's obviously it's a very personal situation. We don't know every scenario. I was just I did a little like homework on this question, and it pretty much, if you're a couple and you're married, it could drop your benefits down to like $1,191 based on the 2021 versus individual, you get $794 for SSI. So that's significant. So, and it also, it shouldn't, if the, I'm not, obviously the daughter we know is receiving benefits, but if your husband, I don't know, based upon his disability, if he is, or fiance, boyfriend, I'm not sure exactly what he's being called right now, but so it really just depends on the eligibility of if he's receiving benefits, if he's not, as Jacqueline said, the income level could put him, so there's a lot of things that go into this. So I believe the best answer is to really just check with the estate attorney.
I think we might have time for one or two more. So there was a general question on opening a trust, probably what's required to do that, where to go. But the general question was just opening a trust.
Right. I saw that. Honestly, when you don't necessarily open a trust like you would open up an investment account at a brokerage firm or a checking account at a retail bank. Opening a trust is you would first go to an estate planning attorney. And if it's a special needs trust, you definitely want to go to an attorney that specializes in special needs planning. Because not all attorneys do special needs trusts. So definitely that's a must. Now, when you meet with your attorney, they're going to draft the trust document. So they're going to talk to you, consult with you. What is your intent in terms of creating the trust? Now, once you sign, in other words, you execute the trust, then you're not done there. You want to make sure that you fund the trust. And how you do that is whatever monies are going to fund the trust or whatever assets, you want to make sure you change the titling of that. So let's say, for example, you just created your own trust. Like I create the Catherine Holcomb Trust. Okay, I see an attorney. Well, it's not funded unless I make sure my investment account is titled in the name of the Catherine Holcomb Trust or the Special Needs Trust, same thing. It's not truly funded until you do that. Now, if you're going to go with a corporate trustee, then you would open that's where you would open up the trust account, but then it still gets funded into the trust account. Same thing with the unique assets. If there's going to be real property held, if there's going to be a closely held asset held, you want to make sure that the titling is in the name of the trust. Otherwise, it's not funded. And quite frankly, that's a step that gets missed oftentimes. And it's not a common mistake, but you definitely want to talk to your attorney on the funding of the trust as well when you have it drafted. If anybody wants to, excuse me, share any more insight on that.
The only thing I'll add to that, and going to the funding, like that's something that our team will work with you on too, to find out and to help you title everything appropriately, whether it's an insurance policy or grandma and grandpa might want to leave the child, an inheritance once they pass, or some money. You always want to make sure, especially because of that $2,000 limit, that if you have over $2,000 in the child's name, it will prevent you from getting government benefits. So you want to make sure that everything goes into a special needs trust. So again, whether it's, if and we can talk to you when you work alongside the attorney to make sure to know what plans on coming into the trust. So if it's just an insurance policy, once you both pass, we can keep it as part of the will. But if grandma and grandpa might be sending in some money once they pass, you might want a standalone trust. So we would be able to work with you and work with your family. And obviously we want to make sure that if grandma and grandpa have that inheritance, that, it might be going to child A, child B, but child C, it has to go to their trust, not in their name. And we would make sure that we dot all our I's, cross our T's to make sure that there's not going to be anything going into that child's name that isn't going into the trust that will prevent them from getting government aid, because that's what we obviously all want to avoid.
I think that's it really for the questions. Everything else seems like a general question that you all had addressed sometime either in another question or in your presentation. So are there any closing remarks you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I just wanted to jump in with one thing here, Stephanie, which is that if anybody is looking for local resources, go ahead and email me. My email is where my name is here, which is janae.russin@ubs.com. And I'll do my best to get you connected with local resources since I'm here in Denver and Boulder.
That's great. All right. Well, with that said, I want to thank everyone so much for being here. Thank you, Jacqueline, Kimberly, Jamal, Catherine, Janae. And then we had one more presenter, Armand, I think. So thank you all so much. We appreciate your time, your dedication, and Kimberly for sharing your personal story. It obviously resonates with all of us and certainly our parents, families, and caregivers. So thank you again. Everybody else who's an attendee, as soon as we end this presentation, there's going to be a survey that pops up. We'd love to know if you have any more questions, thoughts, comments, concerns on the topic, or even just want some more information. You can certainly let us know there. And I will send out a follow-up email, hopefully with additional resources from our presenters and your contact information that was shared as well. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful night, and we appreciate you all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very
Stephanie.
much. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Good night.